Hello, I'm Tim Lawton, MP for East Worthing and Shoreham, and welcome to the latest of my video podcast. As you know, I try and do podcasts on a number of local and national issues of the moment. And the subject I've chosen for this podcast is the change, potentially, to a different form of voting, and the fact that on the 5th of May we should be having a referendum on whether we should use the additional vote system rather than our current first past the post for electing me and all my colleagues, MPs, to this place, the House of Commons, behind me. Now, the reason we're having this vote is that when the new coalition government came to power, one of the agreements in the coalition agreement was to have a referendum on AV. It's something that the Liberal Democrats want to see proportional representation, but it's entirely up to us as to how we vote. And the position of me, and the position of David Cameron and the Conservative Party is that we are not in favour of changing the voting system, and I'm certainly not in favour of changing it to an additional vote system. Why is that? Well, over many years we've had lots of reforms to the way we elect people to Parliament in this country, starting in 1832 with the Great Reform Act, which gave many more people the vote and then brought down the voting age and included women being allowed to vote and so on and so forth. But it's always been under the first past the post system. So the candidate who gets the biggest number of votes becomes the MP. In the East Worthing and Shoreham constituency, at the last election, I got about 48.5% of the vote. So not quite the majority, but a fair bit ahead of the next candidates. Now, if the system were to change and we will go to an additional vote system, then if the top candidate did not get 50% or more of the votes first time round, then what would happen is the lowest candidate, the one who got the fewest number of votes, would be knocked out, and the second preference votes that he or she had got would be distributed to the other candidates, and that would carry on until one of the candidates got over 50% of the vote, and then that candidate would become the MP. Now, anything to do with electoral reform and proportional representation or whatever is highly complicated. AV is perhaps one of the simpler systems. Now, the reason I don't like that system is one, actually, despite all its imperfections, I think the first past the post system works quite well. The person who the biggest number of people want becomes the MP, even if they haven't got the absolute majority. It maintains a very close connection, which I think is really important, between an MP and a constituency. I look after in East Worthing and Shoreham something like 90,000 people. I am the MP for all of those people in that constituency. Whether or not you voted for me, whether or not you voted at all, I am there to represent you on an equal basis. And I think it's really important we maintain that link. Also, people say, well, you'll just get one government, and wouldn't having a coalition government between different parties be a much better idea? Well, that's what we've got now, actually, under the first past the post system, because no one party got more than 325 seats, the majority. There was a coalition between my party, the Conservatives, and the Liberal Democrats, and many of us think that's actually working quite well. So even under the current system, you can get coalition governments and others. What could happen under the additional vote system is that somebody who perhaps came third, got the third highest number of votes. In the case of my constituency, the Labour candidate got about 16.5% of the votes. That candidate could end up being the MP. So just having 1/6 of people's first preference votes could make somebody the MP, and I think that would raise a few eyebrows and actually would make that person represent even fewer members of the constituency than perhaps the person who came top. So I think there are lots of flaws with a change to additional voting. That's probably why there are only 3 other countries in the world that use the AV system: Australia, Papua New Guinea and Fiji. And in Australia, in fact, when they brought it in, they actually saw a fall in the share of the people actually turning up to vote, and later they had to bring in compulsory voting to try and address that. And there are many examples in Australia of MPs being elected who actually came third in the in the first round, and a lot of people, in fact the majority apparently according to opinion polls, want to see a return to the first past the post system. So look, I'm in favour of making the election system more up to date. I think there are lots of unfairnesses in the system at the moment. In East Worthing and Shoreham, the number of electors is around 73,000, which is about average. In other parts of the country, it's only about 55,000. So in certain constituencies, it takes far fewer people to elect an MP. So we want to iron out the size of those constituencies, and we also want to reduce the number of MPs. We think we can reduce the number of MPs by about 10% and still have a good way of representing people in Parliament. We also need to sort out the House of Lords. The last government decided it wanted to do away with most of the hereditary peers. It had a mandate to do that, and so in 1998, 600 and something hereditary peers lost the right to sit and vote in the House of Lords behind me, but nothing was put in its place. So we've now got this big dilemma as how we reform the House of Lords. Should it become all elected, like the House of Commons? Should it become part elected or stay all appointed or whatever? So there are lots of things we can do to reform the electoral system and the way we're represented in this government. And we need to do a lot of that because we know that people have lost a lot of confidence in the way Parliament runs. One way of restoring that confidence is to make sure we are as in touch as possible and as accessible as possible and as in communication as possible with our constituents. That's why I'm doing this podcast today. That's why, as you know, I'm regularly out and about on the streets of Shoreham and Worthing, Lancing, Southwick, doing my street surgeries, doing public meetings, doing regular constituent surgeries, attending lots of local events, and I will always continue to do that because I think that's the first duty of an MP. It's why I have an active website and why every month I put around an electronic newsletter to people to see, so they can see what I've been up to. But I don't think changing the voting system to AV is going to improve things, and actually I think it can make it a lot worse. So that's why I will be campaigning for a no vote in the AV referendum, which is due to take place if the legislation goes through on the 5th of May. But look, that's my view. I've given the reasons for why that's my view. I want to hear what other people have to say. A number of people have written to me, have emailed me to ask me my views. I've given you my views. It's on my website. But I want to hear other people's views about why you think the electoral system does need to be changed, what sort of system it needs to change to, other improvements we can make in this place, or if you do think AV is a good system, then please tell me why. So as usual, there's a survey with this podcast. A number of questions. I'd like to have your answers. Let me know your views, and I'll have a look at them, and they will better inform the way I go about sitting in this place and arguing the case for why Parliament needs to do a better job to represent the electors of this country. So thank you for listening, and I hope you'll take part in the survey. Send me your views. But as ever, if there's anything you need to get hold of me on a local matter, a national matter, then it's pretty easy to do that through this website, through email, through calls, through coming to one of my surgeries or whatever. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you, and thanks for listening.